back to Couch Crew Reviews.
Today we're reviewing the 2019 film Frozen 2, directed by Christopher Buck and Jennifer Lee. Previously on Couch Crew Reviews, we have reviewed the film Explorers and the film Stand By Me, and we're now on to our third film, Frozen 2. For Couch Crew Reviews, we have some rules of thumb regarding our film viewership. First, keep an open mind. That is the biggest rule of thumb, regardless of genre, regardless of expectations, regardless of what you've heard about a film. Always keep an open mind. 2,
watch from beginning to end.
It's imperative to watch from beginning to end because you never know if you're going to see something in the opening of the film that could set up the rest of the film. I know the classic showing up to the theater late, missing trailers, missing the opening of the movie. There's something to be said for seeing the whole movie. And what's cool is nowadays we get a lot of end credit scenes keep audiences kind of locked in all the way to the end. And sometimes you get a little surprise at the end of the film. Third rule is
keep an open mind.
Keep an open mind times 2, because you just never know in terms of genre. Frozen 2 is really largely a musical. Luke is not the biggest fan of musicals, and we'll talk about Frozen versus Frozen 2 in a little bit. But you never know. Even a musical could be really good. Fourth rule of thumb.
Put previous ratings in perspective.
So a lot of times, we'll use IMDb as a reference for our films. And IMDb very conveniently has rater scores. Frozen 2 scored a 7.0 out of 10 for user raters. And the Metacritic score was a 64. So just always reminding people to maybe go with their own viewing and their own rating system rather than just what another rater might give it. And then our rule of thumb for Frozen 2 is more pertaining to the challenge of sequels. A lot of times in our pop culture we have sequel after sequel after sequel. We have franchise movies, we have trilogies. In this instance, Frozen 2 is the sequel to an incredibly popular film in Frozen. But sequels come with their own kind of little bit of baggage. Why is the sequel created? Does the story warrant a sequel? Is it going to become part of a bigger storyline? You never know. Sometimes films start off with a sequel and then it becomes the third, the fourth, the fifth on down the road. So for today, we're here to review Frozen 2. We'll take a look at Frozen 2 as a sequel. We'll comment a bit on story, maybe comment a bit on it as an animated film, and give our
musical.
And as a musical, and then we will also give our overall ratings. We have not previously discussed our overall ratings, so those will be maybe a bit of a surprise in one regard. Frozen 2 was directed by Christopher Buck and Jennifer Lee. Christopher Buck also directed Disney's Tarzan. That was, I think, out in 1999. So he has experience, with animated film. He's the director of the original Frozen as well. And then Jennifer Lee, who's also the director of Frozen and Frozen 2, is also the writer of Frozen. She's also the writer for Wreck-It Ralph and also the writer for Zootopia. So from a storytelling perspective and from maybe an animation perspective, we're dealing with two directors that are very significant writers and very significant from a filmmaking perspective. So I would say I came into Frozen 2 with a lot of expectations, and we were pretty late to the game seeing Frozen 2. So Frozen 2 is the sequel to an incredibly popular film in Frozen. I really loved Frozen, the first film. I thought it was hysterical. What are your guys' thoughts on the first Frozen film outside of Frozen 2?
I thought it was pretty good. They did a really good job of developing all the characters and explaining the plot and all that stuff. And it was pretty much a good movie. There wasn't a whole lot of singing and the plot made sense. That's pretty much all I have to say.
Yeah, I haven't seen it in a while. It just makes sense. So it's good.
That might be a hint of criticism to come. But
And yeah, like Luke said, there wasn't a lot of singing. Which I mean, singing is fine, but
too much singing.
We'll talk about that later. about it later.
Well, I really liked Frozen. I was completely fine with the musical component. I really enjoyed the characters. I liked Sven and Olaf, and I liked the sister relationship. I thought it had a really, really maybe tight or believable storyline, even including the magical components. And I thought it was still controlled, and it still kind of made sense and was ultimately believable. So we all like Frozen. What would you say are the comparison points, or maybe what are some of the setup from what are some of the setups from Frozen that you were maybe expecting from Frozen 2, or that maybe were also included in Frozen 2?
I was expecting more like in the first Frozen there was a lot more like adventure kind of, because in Frozen 2 there you just start off immediately with like 4 songs in a row, and then magically like they there's a forest or like fog they find from when their dad told them a story. So it's kind of like it's really confusing, and Frozen 1, the original Frozen, kind of did a lot better job of like having key points in the film, and Frozen 2 just didn't really have that.
The music was way different. I didn't actually think they needed a Frozen 2. Like, after they, like, saved Arendelle and whatever, it was just kind of like, okay, cool. Go from there. Like, they were just gonna roll as, like, queens. And then this came out just because. I don't think it was actually really necessary. It doesn't tie into the first one at all.
I saw potential for the story in Frozen 2, because I like the idea that rather than just having them both rule Arendelle, it seemed that Elsa had a different fate, and I kind of liked that there was that kind of internal conflict, but the development of the internal conflict for her was, I just thought it was rough, and some of the action scenes and sequences were really just kind of almost discombobulating. I felt like as maybe an adult or scrupulous viewer, I didn't know what was going on, and I was thinking, well, what would a kid think while they're viewing this, you know? And I like the story development of Anna's character as well. Anna, excuse me, as, you know, it was kind of like a film where we were removing Elsa and helping her find her own identity, and Anna finding her own true identity as a leader of Arendelle. And I kind of liked how they brought the parents back into the story in order to set up this greater story outside of Arendelle, this greater kind of plot development. For me, I just felt like a lot of the story was flat. I felt like some of the character development was kind of odd or just kind of awkward, and then at that point the songs just didn't resonate like they did for Frozen. I just felt like Frozen had iconic music, and I just thought the songs and the storyline in Frozen 2 were pretty flat.
Well, for Frozen 2, it's just a lot of singing, and that would be fine if they actually moved along the story, but it was just like, no story, no context, singing, more singing, more singing, and then they try to add context, but it's just mostly singing and walking around and just talking, but not actually introducing any, like, conflict or moving anything along. They don't progress. And then when they do progress, it's choppy and doesn't make any sense. Because it's like, wait, weren't they just going to do something else, but now they're here and singing a weird 80s music type song? And it's like, it just doesn't tie in well. Because, like, it would be a good idea. It would be, like, a good idea, but it's just, like, not. Didn't carry out good.
It's not a good idea.
Colette was referencing a scene with Sven and Kristoff. And it was basically filmed like almost like an 80s rock ballad video, and I thought it was kind of funny, but
it was hilarious, but it was so bad.
It was almost so out of place that it really kind of was almost jarring to what I was just trying to figure out from a convoluted storyline, and it just seemed like the film that was almost like that scene to me almost like it was like analogous to the rest of the film. It just seemed incongruous, a little underdeveloped or almost off key in a way. I guess pun intended, given that this is a musical.
I think they try to put too much in there because there's like the whole like Kristoff and Anna's relationship, and then Elsa wanting to be who she wants to be, and Olaf having an existential crisis, and there is like just and then like the battles and the flashbacks, the different elements, and there was all this stuff going on. If they had just stuck to like Elsa's thing, that would have been fine.
Yeah.
But like they had too much stuff
Too
going
much,
on, and
yeah.
it was just bouncing around.
Yeah. So as an animation film, Frozen 2 obviously holds up. It's a new age Disney film, and so the graphics and the effects are pretty intensive, beautifully rendered. I don't think that's going to be something that's lacking in a film like this.
The animation is pretty, it's like your typical Disney animation. Like, the characters are like cartoony, but you can still tell what they are. And the animation was pretty good. I mean, it was an animation.
I think from a production standpoint, again, you're getting great sound, great animation quality. So it's like almost like you can't go wrong with stories like this. And so, for me, I was probably coming into Frozen 2 with really high expectations, and it just didn't resonate for me, despite, Christopher Buck and Jennifer Lee being very accomplished film writers and obviously very accomplished musicians themselves, I would imagine. There's a talent there and characters that are really iconic in terms of Elsa and Anna and Olaf. So it just seems like it was a recipe, or it was all right there for being a great film, and it just didn't work for me. And back to Colette's point about this needing a sequel, or did Frozen even need a sequel? And that presents a challenge for storytellers and story writers. At what point are we? Chances are, if we're writing a story for Disney, we know we're looking at possibly writing a sequel, but does it warrant it? Is it really necessary? And you wonder at what point are movies just good as standalone movies and in need of a sequel?
Overall rating.
Just let me rate!
Overall rating. Okay, I gave this movie a 2.5 out of 10 because it was pretty bad. Yeah. They sung on average every 7 minutes, and there were a bunch of characters, and there was too much plot, and Olaf disintegrates into his own gravestone. Into his own gravestone because Elsa froze.
Okay, I'm gonna give it a 3.7 out of 10 because
What?
What do you mean what? It's not that good. It was just very music reliant, which is fine if you're gonna make it like a musical. But it was because of all that music, and they still needed to keep it pretty short, like movie length, because you don't want to sit through 3 hours of just get that part out, by the way. I'm not keeping that in.
I'm gonna put that at the very beginning.
We should have outtakes.
But you don't need like 3 hours of that, and it wasn't. But I'm just saying, like, I think within the first 12 minutes, because we paused it, there were 3 songs?
4.
3 or 4 songs, and it was just like it didn't need to have that, and then it was just way too much plot too, and the plot didn't really make sense.
Oh my gosh, I hear a noise on the other side of the river. Wow.
I'm the biggest element of them all. I'm water, except frozen.
Yeah.
There's just like a bunch of things that like didn't make sense. So yeah, it was
I would give Frozen 2 a 3 out of 10. I almost feel like I'm being generous because I just really didn't like the film really at all. And I didn't think that was possible given what Frozen had set up. I did like Olaf. He cracks me up. I like the production components, and I like the animation. I like Sven and Kristoff's relationship. They're kind of funny, but there were just some parts of the film that were just all over the place. thought it was hard to follow, and I feel like some things were pretty forced, and there were parts of the story that just kind of went on hold. The whole thing together just had a lack of continuity for me. So I would recommend just watch Frozen, and you'll have a much better time. And maybe save Frozen 2 for your own ratings.
Overall rating. The
3.05.
Yeah, that puts the overall rating at just over a 3. So for Couch Crew Reviews, we probably would not recommend Frozen 2. But if you're looking for a musical, or if you're looking for something that is potentially a good animated film, maybe that could be the one for you. Next time on Couch Crew Reviews, we will review John Carpenter's 1982 film, The Thing. This will pretty much be Luke's first foray into a true horror film, maybe even for you too, Colette.
I don't know.
And I don't know if I'm going to regret doing this film next. So, all right.
Thanks for watching the second episode.
Third?
It's the second episode of
Okay.
Couch Crew
Also-
Reviews.
We had a pilot.
And, yeah. Thanks for watching.